The stone floor was cold beneath my knees, the iron cuffs around my wrists biting into raw skin. The Blackthorn Pack's gathering hall loomed like a beast, its towering wooden beams clawing toward the ceiling. The room smelled of smoke and blood, the essence of violence soaked into every crevice. I kept my head down, silver hair falling over my face like a curtain. If I didn't move, maybe they wouldn't notice me. Maybe I could disappear. "Bring the Omega forward," one of the elders sneered. Footsteps thundered across the hall and a hand yanked at the chain connected to my collar, dragging me closer to the throne. "He's barely worth the trouble," another voice spat. "A cursed Omega, the last remnant of the Silverfang Pack. An insult to our Alpha." My chest caved in on itself. Cursed. Always cursed. "Enough!" A low, sharp voice cut through the murmurs. I flinched at the sound of it, curling into myself. But the room had gone silent. I risked a glance up. He sat on the throne, the new Alpha, Kieran, the Bloodhound. Dark hair framed a face carved from stone, and his cold eyes gleamed like a predator's. The scars on his hands told stories of war, and his presence was suffocating, the weight of his power pressing down like a vice. He looked at me. For a moment I forgot how to breathe. His gaze wasn't cruel but sharp, dissecting me piece by piece. The room faded, my heartbeat thundering in my ears as he rose to his feet, boots echoing against the floor. When he crouched in front of me, I flinched away, my body betraying me. Kieran froze. I braced for a blow, but it never came. "What have you done to him?" His voice, low and rough, echoed like a distant storm. The elder scoffed. "The Omega is broken. A pathetic gift. An Alpha like you deserves better." A growl rumbled deep in Kieran's chest, and the elder stepped back, fear flickering across his face. Kieran turned back to me, voice gentler but still frayed at the edges. "What's your name?" I pressed my lips together, heart hammering so loud I couldn't think. Speaking was impossible. His hand twitched, as if he wanted to reach for me but stopped himself. "I'm not going to hurt you," he whispered. I didn't believe him. He stood towering over me like an executioner. "Unchain him," Kieran ordered. The elder balked. "Alpha, you can't—" I said unchain him. The guards hesitated, but no one dared defy him. The cuffs snapped open, and I crumpled to the ground, curling into a tight ball. My wrists throbbed, skin rubbed raw. Kieran stepped back, jaw tight. "He's mine now," he declared, voice cutting through the hall like a blade. "Take him to my quarters. If anyone touches him again, I'll rip their throat out." I didn't understand. Why wasn't he angry? Why wasn't he hurting me? I stayed still as hands lifted me, too drained to fight. The last thing I saw before the world faded was Kieran, watching me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. I woke on something soft. For a long moment I didn't dare open my eyes. My body braced for the usual cold slap of stone beneath me, but instead, warmth pressed against my back, the texture of blankets foreign against my skin. The room was dim. I wasn't in the cages. The scent of pine and smoke clung to the air, sharp yet oddly grounding. It lingered in the sheets, the pillows, everywhere. I knew the scent. The Alpha. I shot upright, heart slamming against my ribs. Pain bloomed across my body, the bruises and cuts from years of abuse reminding me of their presence. My chest heaved, panic curling in my throat. The door creaked open, and I froze. Kieran stepped inside, carrying a tray of food. His golden eyes locked onto me, assessing the room before settling on me. I pressed myself against the headboard, shaking. He set the tray down on a nearby table and stepped back, hands raised. "I won't come closer," he said, voice quieter than I expected. I watched him. My body screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. "You're safe here," he continued, leaning against the wall instead of towering over me. "No one will touch you again." I didn't believe him. Still, he didn't push. He sat down in the corner of the room, legs crossed as if he intended to stay. "I don't know what they did to you," he said, voice low, almost bitter. "But it ends now." I curled into myself, tucking my knees to my chest. I waited for the anger, the violence, but it never came. He just sat there, watching me with the quiet patience of someone used to waiting. The food sat untouched for hours, but he never left. The days blurred together. I stayed in the Alpha's room, too afraid to leave, and Kieran never forced me to. He brought food, left clothes by the bed, and spoke to me as if I were capable of answering. I never did. He never demanded it. One night, I woke to the sound of low voices outside the door. "He's cursed, Kieran," a man hissed. "The elders are already saying you've gone soft. Keeping him here, it's dangerous." "I don't care," Kieran snapped. "I'm not my father." "That Omega can't be saved. He's broken." My fingers dug into the blankets, heart pounding. Then Kieran spoke, voice a low snarl. "If anyone touches him, I'll rip their throat out." The door slammed. I didn't know what to make of it. The next day I ventured out of the bed. My limbs trembled with the effort, but I made it to the window, pressing my fingers against the glass. The forest stretched beyond the pack grounds, wild and untamed. A knock startled me and I flinched back. Kieran stood in the doorway holding a wildflower. He seemed uncertain, his rough exterior cracking as he carefully placed the flower on the table. He left without a word. I stared at the flower for hours. The rain pattered against the window, a steady rhythm that filled the suffocating silence. I sat on the far side of Kieran's quarters. I hadn't slept in days. Not really. Kieran was gone, patrolling the borders after rumors of rogue activity. The absence of his quiet, looming presence gnawed at me, leaving my chest tight and hollow. But it wasn't his absence that kept me awake. It was the nightmares. The scent of blood, the snap of bone, the echo of a dying scream. I pressed my hands to my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, trying to force the memories back into the dark. But they never stayed buried. The door creaked open, and I tensed, heart leaping into my throat. Kieran stepped inside, shaking the rain from his hair, his sharp gaze finding me. "You haven't moved," he said, voice low and careful. I swallowed, curling tighter. He crossed the room like he was afraid I'd bolt. "I spoke to Eli," he began, sitting on the edge of the bed. "He told me what he found out about the curse." My heart seized. I shook my head, fingers digging into my arms, a silent plea for him to stop. Kieran didn't. "Your mate," he said, voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "The Alpha who died during the war? It was my father, wasn't it? He killed him,